The morning sun, filtered through the dense canopy of a mature maple, cast dappled shadows across the brownstone garden on West 81st Street. Leo Maxwell, his hands calloused from years of coaxing beauty from stubborn soil, wiped a bead of sweat from his brow with the back of a gloved hand. He was a man of quiet intensity, his movements precise, almost meditative. He preferred the silent company of plants to the unpredictable chaos of people. His past, a tangled knot of bad decisions and misplaced trust, had taught him that lesson well. The police, in his experience, were rarely a solution. They were often another problem. Today's task was ambitious, transforming a neglected patch of overgrown weeds into a vibrant herb garden for the new tenants, a young couple eager for a taste of country life in the heart of the city. Leo plunged his shovel into the earth, the rich, dark soil yielding with a satisfying crunch. He worked steadily, the rhythmic scrape and lift a familiar comfort. Then the shovel struck something hard, not a rock, not a root. The sound was different, a dull, resonant thunk. Leo knelt, brushing away the loose soil with his gloved fingers. What he uncovered was not a piece of old pottery or a forgotten toy. It was bone. Not a smooth, weathered stone, but something organic, curved, and unsettlingly familiar. He carefully excavated around it, his breath catching in his throat. As more earth fell away, the shape became undeniable. A human jawbone, yellowed with age, a few teeth still clinging stubbornly to their sockets. It stared up at him from the dark earth, a silent scream from the past. A cold dread, unlike any he had ever known, seeped into Leo's bones. His first instinct, the one drilled into every citizen, was to call 911. But then a flicker of something else, a memory of flashing blue lights, of uniformed officers with hard eyes, of questions that felt like accusations. The last time he had called the police, it had ended badly, very badly. He had been a witness, then a suspect, then just another face in a system that cared little for individual truths. He had lost everything. His business, his reputation, his trust in authority. He looked at the jawbone again. It was old, very old, buried deep. What if this was an ancient burial, something archaeological, not criminal? What if reporting it led to months of investigation, his work halted, his name dragged through the mud again? He had just started to rebuild his life, piece by painful piece. A dangerous thought, a reckless whisper, began to form in his mind. What if he could find out more himself? Just a little. Enough to understand. Enough to protect himself from the storm he knew would follow if he made that call. He had a knack for details, for seeing what others missed. The earth, after all, always told a story if you knew how to listen. He carefully wrapped the jawbone in a piece of old canvas, tucked it into his tool bag, and covered the disturbed soil with a layer of fresh topsoil. His heart pounded a frantic rhythm against his ribs, a drumbeat of fear and a strange, burgeoning curiosity. He would not call the police. Not yet. He would investigate. Leo finished his work for the day, his mind a whirlwind of possibilities and dread. Back in his small, sparsely furnished apartment in Astoria, he carefully unwrapped the jawbone. It was undeniably human. The bone felt heavy in his hand, a tangible link to a life long gone. His first step was to research the property. He knew the brownstone had a long history, dating back to the late 19th century. He spent hours online, sifting through property records, old newspaper archives and historical society documents. The brownstone at 12B West 81st Street had changed hands many times, each owner a fleeting ghost in the building's long memory. He focused on the period when the garden would have been established or significantly altered, cross-referencing with any missing persons reports from the early to mid-20th century. It was a needle in a haystack, but Leo was methodical. He found records of a major renovation in the early 1950s, a period when the original backyard was transformed into the manicured space it was today. This narrowed the window. His search led him to the tenants who had lived in the brownstone during that 1950s renovation, a family named the Millers who had moved out abruptly in 1955. And before them, a single woman, Eleanor Vance, who had occupied the ground-floor apartment, the one with the garden access, from 1948 to 1953. Her departure was listed as moved out of state, but there was no forwarding address, no trace, just a blank space in the city's meticulous records. Eleanor Vance. The name resonated with a quiet hum. Leo found a grainy black and white photograph of her in an old society column attending a charity gala. She was a striking woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and a determined set to her jaw. The image, though faded, seemed to hold a flicker of defiance. The next day, instead of heading to another landscaping job, Leo found himself drawn back to West 81st Street. He needed to see the brownstone through new eyes. He lingered across the street, observing the building, imagining Eleanor Vance living there. He noticed a small, ornate gargoyle perched above the third-floor window, a detail he had never truly registered before. As he stood there, a woman emerged from the brownstone next door. She was elderly, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, her eyes sharp and curious. She carried a small, yapping terrier. "Lovely day for a stroll, isn't it, dearie?" she chirped, her voice surprisingly strong for her age. "Though I suppose you're admiring the landscaping. You're the one who fixed up the Miller place, aren't you?" Leo nodded, a polite smile on his face. "Leo Maxwell." "Yes, I am. Agnes Periwinkle," she announced, extending a surprisingly firm hand. "Lived here since '47. Seen a lot of changes on this block, and a lot of people come and go from that brownstone." She gestured with a bony finger towards 12B. The Millers, bless their hearts, they were a noisy bunch, always arguing. But before them now, she was a quiet one. Eleanor Vance, kept to herself? Leo's heart quickened. "Eleanor Vance, you knew her?" Agnes's eyes narrowed slightly, a thoughtful frown creasing her brow. "Knew her as much as anyone did. She was a writer, they said, always tapping away on that old typewriter. She had a peculiar way about her, very private. And then, one day, poof, gone, just like that. Never said goodbye. The Millers moved in a few weeks later. Never thought much of it at the time. People moved a lot back then. Did she have any family?" Leo asked, trying to keep his voice casual. Agnes shook her head. "Not that I ever saw. Always alone. Though there was a gentleman. He visited sometimes, always late at night, very secretive. Never stayed long. I only ever saw his car, a big black sedan, parked down the street." A gentleman. Secretive. Leo felt a thrill of discovery. This was more than just a missing person. This was a story. "Did you ever hear anything unusual from her apartment?" Leo ventured, his gaze drifting towards the garden. Agnes paused, her gaze distant. "Unusual, well, she was a writer. Sometimes you'd hear the typewriter clacking away at all hours. And sometimes a low thud, like something heavy falling. But that's all. Nothing to worry about." She gave a dismissive wave of her hand. "Old buildings make noises." Leo thanked Agnes, his mind racing. A writer, a secretive visitor, a low thud. It all painted a picture, albeit a blurry one. He needed to get back into that garden. He felt a pull, an almost magnetic force, drawing him back to the earth that had given up its secret. Leo found an excuse to return to the brownstone a few days later, claiming he needed to check the irrigation system. The new tenants, oblivious to the macabre history beneath their budding herbs, welcomed him warmly. He spent hours meticulously examining the garden, not just for irrigation leaks, but for anything else the earth might reveal. He focused on the area where he had found the jawbone, expanding his search outwards. He dug deeper, sifting through the soil with his hands, feeling for anomalies. The sun beat down, but Leo barely noticed, lost in his grim excavation. Then, his fingers brushed against something hard and smooth, unlike the rough texture of stone. He pulled it out. It was a small, tarnished silver locket. Old, very old. He carefully pried it open. Inside, two faded photographs, one a younger Eleanor Vance, her smile radiant, the other a man. Tall, distinguished, with a stern gaze and a neatly trimmed mustache. He looked familiar, but Leo couldn't place him. The locket was a powerful clue. It was personal. It suggested a connection, a relationship. and it was buried with the jawbone. Leo returned to his apartment, the locket clutched in his hand. He spent the entire night researching the man in the photograph. He cross-referenced Eleanor Vance's name with prominent figures from the 1940s and 50s. It took hours, but finally a name emerged: Arthur Finch, a respected, highly influential judge in the New York legal system. He had died in 1968, a celebrated figure, a judge and a reclusive writer, a secret relationship. The pieces were beginning to connect, forming a disturbing mosaic. Leo felt a growing sense of unease. He was digging into powerful secrets, secrets that people had gone to great lengths to bury. He started to feel watched, a prickling sensation on the back of his neck. He found himself checking his rearview mirror more often, scrutinizing faces in the subway. Was it paranoia, or was someone else aware of what he was unearthing? He decided to visit the New York Public Library, a vast repository of historical information. He found old newspaper articles about Judge Arthur Finch. He was known for his strict moral code, his unwavering commitment to justice, and his seemingly impeccable personal life. There was no mention of Eleanor Vance. Their relationship was clearly clandestine. As he was leaving the library, a sudden, sharp voice cut through the hushed atmosphere. "You're Leo Maxwell, aren't you?" Leo turned. Standing before him was a woman in her late 60s, impeccably dressed, with a sharp, intelligent face that seemed to hold a lifetime of secrets. Her eyes, a piercing blue, fixed on him with an unnerving intensity. "I am," Leo replied, his guard immediately up. "Can I help you?" "You've been asking questions about Eleanor Vance," she stated, not a question but an accusation. "And about my father, Arthur Finch." Leo's breath hitched. This was Finch's daughter. He had seen her name in the obituaries, a brief mention of a surviving child, Margaret Finch. "I'm just doing some historical research for a client." Leo lied smoothly, his mind racing for an escape route. Margaret Finch's lips curled into a thin, humorless smile. "Don't insult my intelligence, Mr. Maxwell. I know about the brownstone. I know about the garden. And I know you're not just a landscaper with a sudden interest in mid-century New York history." Her voice was low, controlled, but there was an undeniable steel beneath it. "My father was a man of immense reputation, a pillar of this city. Any indiscretion would have been devastating." "Indiscretion?" Leo challenged, his own voice hardening. "Or a crime?" Margaret's eyes flashed. "You know nothing. You are digging up things best left buried. For your own good, Mr. Maxwell, I suggest you stop." "Now? What happened to Eleanor Vance?" Leo pressed, ignoring her warning. Why did she disappear? And why was her locket buried in that garden? Margaret took a step closer, her voice dropping to a chilling whisper. "Some truths are too ugly to face. Some secrets are meant to remain secrets. You are playing with fire, Mr. Maxwell, and you might just get burned." She turned abruptly and walked away, her departure as sudden and unsettling as her appearance. Leo stood there, the weight of her words settling over him. He was no longer just an amateur detective. He was a threat, and he was getting closer to a truth that someone desperately wanted to keep hidden. Margaret Finch's warning echoed in Leo's mind, a constant, unsettling hum, but it only fueled his resolve. He knew he was on the right track. The jawbone, the locket, Eleanor Vance's disappearance, and Judge Finch's secret affair, it was all connected. He returned to the brownstone, this time under the cover of night. He had noticed a small, disused shed at the very back of the garden, overgrown with ivy. It looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. He suspected it might hold more clues. Using a set of lock-picking tools he'd acquired years ago for a brief, ill-advised stint as a handyman, Leo carefully opened the rusted padlock. The air inside was thick with dust and the smell of decay. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing a jumble of old gardening tools, forgotten furniture, and stacks of yellowed newspapers. In a far corner, tucked beneath a pile of rotting burlap sacks, he found it, a small wooden chest. It was old, intricately carved, and surprisingly heavy. He pried it open. Inside, nestled amongst faded silk scarves, were more personal effects: a small, leather-bound diary, its pages brittle with age, and a collection of letters tied with a ribbon. Eleanor Vance's diary. Leo carefully opened the diary. The elegant cursive script, though faded, was still legible. He began to read, his heart pounding with each revelation. The diary chronicled Eleanor's passionate, yet clandestine, affair with Arthur Finch. She wrote of their stolen moments, their shared intellectual pursuits, and her desperate longing for him to leave his wife. But as the entries progressed, the tone shifted. Eleanor's hope turned to despair, her love to bitter resentment. Finch had promised to leave his wife, but he never did. He was a man obsessed with his public image, his career, his legacy. Then, a chilling entry, dated October 12, 1953. Arthur came tonight. He was agitated. Said his wife suspects. Said we must end this. I pleaded with him. I told him about the child. He grew pale. His face, usually so composed, contorted with a terrible fear. He said it would ruin him. Ruin everything. He said he would take care of it. I fear what take care of it truly means. The child. Eleanor was pregnant with Finch's child. The implications hit Leo with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't just an indiscretion. This was a secret that could have destroyed a powerful man's life and career. The next entry, October 13, 1953, he returned. His eyes were cold. He brought a drink, said it was to calm my nerves. I drank it. It tasted bitter. My head swims. He is talking about a solution, a permanent solution. I feel so tired, so very tired. The diary ended there abruptly. The last words chillingly prophetic. Leo's hands trembled. He had found not just a crime, but a motive. A powerful man, desperate to protect his reputation, silencing the woman who threatened to expose his secret. And the jawbone, it was Eleanor Vance. The jawbone of a woman whose life had been brutally cut short to preserve a lie. But then, the plot twist. Leo continued to sift through the chest. Beneath the diary, he found another stack of letters. These were different. They were addressed to Eleanor, but they were not from Arthur Finch. They were from Margaret Finch, Arthur's daughter. The letters were dated from 1952 to 1953, preceding Eleanor's disappearance. They were filled with a strange mix of admiration and possessiveness. Margaret, a young woman at the time, expressed a profound devotion to her father, almost an obsession. She wrote about her suspicions regarding his affair, her intense jealousy, and her determination to protect her father's reputation at all costs. One letter, dated October 11, 1953, the day before Eleanor's last diary entry, sent a fresh wave of dread through Leo. Dearest Eleanor, I know about you and my father. He is a great man, a good man. He must not be ruined. I will not allow it. I will protect him, even from himself. I will protect his legacy. You must understand, some things are more important than fleeting affections. I will ensure his future is secure, and yours will be silent. Leo reread the last line. Yours will be silent. It was not Arthur Finch who had killed Eleanor. It was his daughter, Margaret, the woman who had confronted him at the library, the woman who had warned him to stop digging. She had been protecting her father's legacy, not just from exposure, but from the very woman who threatened it. She had been protecting him from himself. The jawbone, the locket, the diary, the letters, it all pointed to Margaret. She hadn't just known about the affair. She had intervened. She had been the one to ensure Eleanor's silence. And she had buried the evidence in the garden, perhaps with her father's unwitting knowledge, or perhaps entirely on her own. The low thud. Agnes Periwinkle had heard. The secretive gentleman who visited late at night. Could that have been Margaret, disguised or simply arriving in a dark car that Agnes mistook for a man's? A cold, terrifying realization washed over Leo. Margaret Finch knew he was investigating. She knew he had the jawbone, and she had just warned him. He was no longer just digging up the past. He was now a target. Leo knew he couldn't go to the police. Not yet. Not with Margaret Finch's warning ringing in his ears. He needed more. He needed something irrefutable, Something that would stand up in court, something that would ensure Margaret Finch could not escape justice, or worse, turn the tables on him. He had the diary, the letters, the jawbone. But he needed a confession, or at least a definitive reaction. He decided on a dangerous gambit. He would confront Margaret Finch not in a public place, but in the very garden where Eleanor Vance's life had ended. He would bring the evidence and he would force her hand. He called her, feigning a casual tone. "Ms. Finch, I found something else in the garden, something that might interest you. Perhaps we could meet there tomorrow morning. Just you and I." There was a long silence on the other end. Then Margaret's voice, cold and sharp. "Very well, Mr. Maxwell. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., the garden." The next morning the air was crisp, the sky a brilliant blue. Leo arrived early, placing the wooden chest, now containing the jawbone, the locket, the diary and Margaret's letters, on the newly tilled earth where the herb garden was meant to be. He stood back, waiting. Precisely at 9 a.m., Margaret Finch arrived. She was dressed impeccably, her face a mask of composure, but her eyes, those piercing blue eyes, held a flicker of something akin to fear. Or perhaps something darker. "Mr. Maxwell," she greeted, her voice devoid of warmth. "What is it you wish to show me?" Leo gestured to the open chest. "I think you know Miss Finch. I found Eleanor Vance's diary, and your letters to her." Margaret's eyes immediately fixed on the diary, then on her own familiar handwriting in the letters. Her composure wavered, a barely perceptible tremor in her hand. "These are fabrications," she stated, her voice tight. "A desperate attempt to smear a good family name." "Are they?" Leo countered, his voice calm, steady. "The diary details Eleanor's affair with your father, her pregnancy, and her fears for her life. And your letters, Miss Finch, they detail your obsession with your father's reputation, your jealousy, and your chilling promise to ensure Eleanor's silence." He picked up the jawbone, holding it up. "And this is Eleanor Vance, buried in this very garden, a silent testament to your actions." Margaret's face, usually so controlled, contorted with a mixture of rage and desperation. "You have no idea what you are meddling with. My father, he was a great man. He deserved his legacy. She would have destroyed him, ruined everything. I had to protect him." Her voice rose, a raw, guttural sound that shattered the morning quiet. "She was a threat, a parasite. She deserved to be silenced. She was pregnant with your father's child," Leo said, his voice quiet, cutting through her tirade. "An innocent life. You took 2 lives, Miss Finch, to protect a reputation." Margaret lunged forward, her hand reaching for the jawbone, her eyes wild. "Give that to me. You cannot prove anything. I will deny it all." Leo sidestepped her, holding the jawbone out of reach. "It's over, Miss Finch. The truth is out. I have everything. The diary, your letters, the remains, it's all here." Her eyes darted around the garden, then to the brownstone, as if seeking an escape. Her face was a mask of defeat, but also a chilling, unrepentant resolve. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice suddenly calm, almost serene. "Some things are worth dying for. Some legacies are worth killing for." Just then, the sound of sirens pierced the morning air. Leo hadn't called them, but he had anticipated this. He had sent an anonymous tip to a trusted journalist he knew, detailing his findings and suggesting they be present for a major revelation. At the brownstone at 9 a.m., he had gambled that Margaret's reaction would be the final piece of evidence. Margaret Finch's eyes widened as the police cars pulled up, their lights flashing, painting the garden in a strobe of red and blue. Her gaze met Leo's, and in that moment he saw not just defeat, but a chilling pride. She had done what she believed was necessary. The police swarmed the garden. Leo stepped forward, holding up the jawbone, the diary, and the letters. "Sergeant," he said, his voice clear and steady, "I have something you need to see, and a story you need to hear." Margaret Finch offered no resistance. She stood silently as the officers approached, her gaze fixed on the jawbone, a grim satisfaction playing on her lips. The garden, once a place of quiet beauty, had finally given up its darkest secret.